Minute now. We're live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Gravity Max live stream. So today we are going over America's terms of service, also known as the U.S. Constitution, and we're going to go through it article by article, section by section, and we're going to summarize it and talk about what's up. And I think it'll be a fun episode. So, yeah.
Thank you, Zach.
Yep. Yeah, thanks for coming,
Yeah.
Zach. Fun guest. And yeah, this will be another fun episode. So let's just jump right into it. Okay, so this video is not intended for children under 13 years old. If you are under 13 years old, please do not watch this video, as the topics we discuss are meant for those with at least a high school level of education. If you are not 13, you will not understand the scientific topics discussed in this video. Or historical topics, I suppose, because this is more of a history episode. But yeah, don't watch this. I don't want to get sued. Okay. Now, visit Gravity Max website at gravitymaxmedia.com. We've got a few things there, a few pages. We've got book previews, a little like news tab, and yeah, it's a pretty good website. Also, follow Gravity Max on your favorite forms of social media for updates. Yeah, what's up?
I was listening to the audio to check to see that we're good, and me listening to you on the stream perfectly lined up with you saying, so yeah. They like lined up at the exact time.
Wow.
Great.
Oh, that's weird.
I guess I said it twice.
Yeah, you said it at exactly
30-second intervals. Wow. But is our audio good?
Yeah, that's why I'm talking for a long time right now. Zach, say a very long sentence for me.
Oh, really? I mean, okay.
I think we should
If you could talk and say the same thing 30 seconds apart, you're basically the G-man at that point.
Yeah, maybe I just have a timer going. Anyway, links in the description for social media and website. Also, follow Sebastian on social media, Instagram, Twitter, and his YouTube channel, 128 Seconds. He's got great videos, and they're only 128 seconds long, so you don't have to listen to us ramble for hours on end. But if you like hearing us ramble for hours on end, and you like that, then that's why you clicked on this video. Anyway, links in the description for that as well. And finally, new book coming out November 1st, Bottled Up Flame. It will be the sequel to A Truly Dead Rock if you've read A Truly Dead Rock. If not, the link is in the description to Amazon where you can buy it. And this book will be available on Amazon soon, and I will be releasing the cover shortly. But until then, it shall remain a mystery. All right. And yeah, here we are. America's terms of service.
Good, by the way. Our audio is
great.
Saucy.
Great, yeah. So, I think many countries have constitutions, like just to keep organized, even if they aren't exactly the same as our constitution. I imagine that it's just useful to have structure, unless it's just a generally chaotic system, or like it's just totalitarian and the ruler just kind of does whatever they want. But other than that, I imagine every democratic nation at least should probably have a constitution. I don't know.
Yeah,
Not always,
Mhm.
because there are a lot of examples of unwritten constitutions.
Okay.
Like, even Great Britain, which has since become a democratic country, does not have a singular codified constitution.
Okay.
Instead, the Magna Carta and other important documents form the basis of law. So, really, of the written constitutions, I would say the U.S. is actually quite a peculiar example because how detailed the written constitution is.
Mhm.
A lot of countries have less specific constitutions, or like a combination of documents that make up the basis of rule.
That's interesting. Yeah.
There are only 4 countries without a written constitution. Those 4 countries are Israel, New Zealand, Saudi Arabia, and the United Kingdom.
Wow. So North Korea has a constitution somehow.
North Korea
Yes.
Wonder what it says.
Denny's order.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so the U.S. Constitution, as Zach said. It's very specific, I guess, compared to other nations, which I guess can be good and bad. I think the intent was to be more specific, to specifically outline like we don't want tyrannical systems and whatever. So I think the intention probably succeeded there, but that does, I guess, it could come with drawbacks because, if you have like things spelled out specifically, then there are some cases of things where like it when you see it and it can't really be described. And so you might have problems within the system, like just fraudulent and just generally like, how would you say, just not very upstanding behavior can still be done while abiding by the
Yeah.
rules. Whereas in these other systems that are maybe a bit looser, you're able to sort of call people out on that. But on the other hand, it is good to sort of have a solid document so that there's sort of consistency. So
Mhm.
yeah, good and bad.
And there's still ambiguity in
Yeah,
some of the clauses of the Constitution, definitely. And the way that people interpret it, as well as the amendment,
mm,
can definitely make a big impact. But another thing about the Constitution is, I would say, it's much more easy to understand than the terms of service of any company.
that's
So
true.
it's kind of funny how America as a nation has basically a terms of service that are simply stated,
Hmm.
but a company or a corporation like Google has to have like a 50-page terms of service
Yeah,
that no one has ever read.
yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's funny. So definitely, there's a lot of room within this document for different things to happen, I guess. I mean, because if you think about it, like this document, it's not only like the rules, but it sort of structures the government, like our government, and it's kind of building a nation, like from the first place when it was ratified in 1788 or 1787. I think it depends by the
In
state.
87, I think.
I think it was like
Maybe it depends
some,
on the calendar.
yeah.
What time zone are we talking here?
Yeah, I think Delaware was probably first. Obviously, that was Delaware. Um, Probably they were in 1787, and others came later. But yeah, when this document was ratified, it basically got rid of the old system, which was the Articles of Confederation, and put in this new system. Um, and so I guess I'll talk briefly about the Articles of Confederation. They were pretty much just like a weaker form, I guess you could say, of the Constitution. It didn't have a president, so there was no president between like 1776 when the Declaration of Independence was sent and 1788 when George Washington was elected, or 1789 when he was inaugurated. But it was much weaker. Basically, they sent representatives from each of the 13 states to their like organization, and to pass any law, they needed 9 out of 13 of the states to agree to it, which is sort of like every law had to be passed with the same standard that amendments must be passed under this new system. So it was very difficult to get anything done, and it just did not work well. Like, I think there were things in there like the federal government could request troops from the states didn't have to give them. So,
Yeah, and the
if,
same thing with taxes. So
mhm.
it couldn't really raise revenue that well.
Yeah, and that would obviously cause problems because if there's a war, if the nation's under attack and New York or like Georgia or whatever state is like, yeah, I don't really feel like it, then that would become a problem. And the same thing with taxes. So they replaced this weaker document with this new document, the Constitution, and that's the system that we still have today for over 200 and not 50, but over 200 years, right? Yeah, so quite a while. Um, but yeah, so shall we get started with the first article? All right, or
230
the preamble.
years.
232. Yeah. All right. So we start with the preamble, which is kind of like their thesis statement, I guess you could say. It's like if you're writing an essay. Um, this is basically where the founders outlined just general what they want to accomplish with this document. Part of it is in the preamble, part of it says to establish a more perfect union because As I said before, the Articles of Confederation had been a union, but it was imperfect, so they wanted
I don't
to
know
fix it.
if you didn't just throw the preamble in on
Yeah,
this.
it's pretty short. The preamble, do you want me to just read it? I have it up. All right.
Yeah,
Okay,
read
okay.
it
So
off.
yeah, famously it starts with "We the people." That's what we put up there. But yeah, "We the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America." So that's the preamble. So yeah, just listed some points. So yeah, more perfect union translates to Articles of Confederation sucked. Establish
Yeah,
justice, justice system, just, you don't want anarchy, essentially. Domestic tranquility, along the same vein, sort of to have security for the people of the nation, provide for the common defense, defend against enemies, general welfare. Yeah, secure the blessings of liberty, like just, freedom and stuff. So I think this is very general and um, it gets more in depth later, but I think it's pretty good for a start.
I think there's definitely a parallel between the
Mhm,
preamble of the Constitution and parts of the Declaration of Independence.
definitely.
And the circumstances of both of those documents are actually similar because the Declaration of Independence was intended to be made uh, after they had already tried to make olive branch petitions and had tried to negotiate peace with Great Britain. But the Constitution was similar because they originally intended just to fix the Articles of Confederation.
Mm.
And eventually they realized that the entire system in the Articles of Confederation wasn't going to work. So they had to change and produce something entirely new.
Hmm.
So that's like one of the many ways that the two documents are similar. But I think the use of people in general echoes the same ideal in the Declaration of Independence of like egalitarian values
Mhm.
and everyone being entitled to the same Lockean rights. The question that it brings up, though, is who counts as part of the people of the United States
Yeah.
and who is entitled to what the government is providing.
Mhm.
And it would
Definitely.
obviously
Yeah.
exclude indentured servants,
Mhm.
slaves, and Native Americans or people that did not have citizenship.
Yeah. Yeah, so definitely it was still sort of this time period with a lot of its, problems and hypocrisies. But it was also like the Constitution, there was sort of like had to be compromise in it for it to exist at all, which kind of sucks because it like tarnishes it a little bit. Um, Sort of like we'll talk about some of these compromises later, but yeah, there's a lot of like mentions in the Constitution. They don't actually ever use the word slave, but they pretty much say everyone else and then
Mm-hmm.
everyone else other than the people we just said, and the people they just said is, everyone who isn't a slave. So they sort of skirt around the issue, and yeah, it's bad. But we have amended it. There was an amendment, so that's good. Um, but yeah, so that's the preamble. Let's go to the next slide. All right, Article 1. So, Article 1 outlines how the legislature is going to work, and it is the article with the most sections in the Constitution. There are 7 articles, and some of them are just one section long. Some of them have like 3 or 4, but Article 1 has 10 sections, and yeah, it's long, but it outlines, the legislative body of the nation, and I think that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, there's a particular reason why the founders decided to make the legislative branch the most outlined.
Hmm.
I think it's because, first of all, they vested the most power in the legislative branch, which is due to the natural right philosophy and the fact that the founders believed in self governance a
Hmm.
lot. And the legislative body is inherently the one that is most tied to its constituents. So they thought it was the most democratic body.
Mhm.
even though democracy itself is not mentioned in the Constitution.
Yeah.
But it's obvious that they wanted the government to be by the people. So that's why they vested the most power in the legislative branch, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. It was, the legislative branch is intentionally the strongest one. Um, and yeah, so let's just get right into it, right? All right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so we start with section one, which is a short section, and literally all it really says is the legislative power of the nation will be put into a House of Representatives and a Senate, and that the House of Representatives will be from the people, and the Senate will be from the states. I think it's one sentence actually. Let's see. Yeah, the text is all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and a House of Representatives. So that's it. Um, Very brief, but I mean it's important. Obviously, it just sort of says there will be a Senate and there will be a House of Representatives, and then the next two sections actually outline the structure of the Senate and the House of Representatives.
Yeah. Before we get into those, though,
Yeah.
I think we should look at why they decided on the bicameral legislature.
Yeah.
And it's actually a result of the Connecticut Compromise, which is named after Connecticut.
Yeah.
Connecticut pretty much produced nothing else.
Other than compromises.
Yeah. Basically, the small states wanted each state to have equivalent representation and equivalent votes, like they did in the Articles of Confederation. But the large states were like, nah, that's whack. We have more people, so we should have more representatives. So the delegates from Connecticut decided that it would be a good idea if they had one house where the amount of people in each state impacted the number of representatives, and another house in which each state had equal representation. And I think that's why America's bicameral structure is very interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And we'll get into this in a second, but the Senate actually used to be even more for the states. It used to be the states, like themselves, the legislative body of a state would pick the senator rather than the people of the state voting for senator. Although that was changed with some amendment 17th, I believe.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah. Yeah.
For which one?
For popular election of senators, that was 17th.
Yeah, 17th Amendment.
So, yeah, so definitely it's bicameral, and the House of Representatives is, supposed to represent the people, whereas the Senate is supposed to represent the state. But even in this like first section, it doesn't even say that. It just says there will be two houses, and these are the two houses. But yeah, let's get into the next two sections because these explain the houses a bit more, like in more detail. So yeah, all right. So section two is all about the House of Representatives and just its structure, how it will be organized essentially, and yeah. So it also sets the terms. So it's 2-year terms in the House of Representatives, and yeah. Let's see. As Zach said, it's about, state population is what it's based off. Oh, yeah, but here I think is, yeah, okay. So this is where they have the 3/5 compromise, which is, bad, I guess, like a negative thing in history, um, which was that slaves, although again they didn't say slaves, but they were very obviously referencing slaves. The number of slaves in a state would only count as 3/5 of the population for that state, so that for the purposes of determining how many representatives they
I
should
think
have.
it's like really interesting how they don't like actually say slaves or slavery really in the Constitution until they made it illegal, or they abolished it.
Yeah.
It makes you think because kind of the way that we look at history is that they like slavery was so common; it was just like an industry, is what we're like taught to think. But their hesitancy to put it in the Constitution kind of makes me think that they knew what they were doing wasn't great.
Yeah.
Like wasn't good and all of that stuff. So it just kind of runs counter to what we're usually taught about there in the common vernacular about slavery and like how people thought of it, what the norm was, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I
I
assume
think
that. Yeah.
many
Go
of the founders, even the slave owning founders themselves, like Thomas Jefferson, recognized that it was morally corrupt and it went against all of the principles that America was established for. But very few of the founders were able to say that position without risking political disgrace
Mm.
because of the amount of Southern politicians that had a lot of weight in the early republic. But even Jefferson himself wrote about slavery and the problem with it, specifically its morality. I think most of the founders, I would say, thought that slavery was a sin. And some of them thought that but still profited off it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like, definitely the language of the Constitution sort of speaks of this like hesitancy. I feel like there were some probably that were more starkly against it, and others that weren't, and I think that was probably
Samuel Adams,
Mhm.
Samuel and John Adams were both against slavery.
Yeah.
Apparently, Benjamin Franklin was kind of like in the middle. He was iffy on if he wanted slaves. We all know that Tom Jeff had slaves. James Madison also did. But yeah, like you're saying, I think there is like a wide variety, or there was, I should say, a wide variety of founding fathers and what they believed to be slavery, or what they believed slavery's ethical standing is.
Yeah.
So that could also play into, like, yeah, what we were just saying, it could play into why they didn't include it, because they were trying to argue about, like, should it be a thing, should it not be, so they just skirted around it,
Yeah, and another interesting thing about the compromise, in the way we think about it, is that it would actually be more likely that the abolitionists, like those that sided with the abolitionists, would say like not to count the slaves at all, whereas it would be more the Southerners saying to count the slaves because they wanted just, the political power of having a higher population in the House of Representatives. So the whole like issue, it's just like it's so gross. Just like such a sad time in history, and such like a tarnish on a document that has many other good aspects and has secured freedom for many other people.
A lot of people say that slavery is the worst thing to ever happen in American history, and I would say, it's definitely like up, if not the most.
Yeah, I'd probably say it's the worst, just because of how long it lasted and what an institution it was. Although there were like other events too, but like they didn't last as long and weren't as pervasive. Um, so yeah, so yeah, but other than that, um, what is established in the House of Representatives is, I think they say something like the number of representatives, like it has to be proportional, but there can't be more than one representative for every 30,000 people, which is interesting.
Yeah, that's the ratio.
Yeah, because America has like 300 million people now, but we don't have like 10,000 House of Representative people.
Wait a minute. We have.
It says no more than 30,000, so it's obviously allowed to be less than. But I just find that interesting because hypothetically, we could have upwards of 10,000 House of Representative people, congressmen. Like it wouldn't be unconstitutional to just have there be 10,000 of them. It would make it hard to keep track of them. But yeah, I think, is this also where they established the census?
Yes.
Okay.
Every 10 years is when the census is.
Yeah.
And they also say that in order to be a representative, you have to be at least 25, have 7 years as a citizen, and reside in the state which you represent.
Hmm.
And another interesting part of Article 1, Section 2 is that the voting requirements for voting for the House of Reps would be the same as the requirements for the state legislator of the voter. So if
Hmm.
you lived in Connecticut, for example, and you met the requirements to vote for your state legislator, then you could vote for the House of Representatives as well.
Okay. Hmm.
And they wanted to avoid states being able to make their state legislator more accessible than the House of Representatives.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah,
Yeah. So,
interesting.
yeah, like we
Yeah.
were saying earlier, the bicameral system. I want to see how is that unique to the U.S. or because I don't really know a lot about other countries' governments, but I feel like the bicameral system is kind of a staple of American politics. Um, a lot of people, like we were having a conversation earlier about the efficiency or the effectiveness of it, and definitely back then in those times when like there was like less people, a lower population, I should say, of the country, it worked kind of effectively. But now a lot of people nowadays are saying that the nothing gets done
Mm.
basically because the bicameral system paired with the two-party system doesn't work, or so people say. So
Mm.
it's interesting, and I would like to see if any other countries have this bicameral system.
There are a few other countries
Yeah.
Argentina, Australia, Canada. I think technically you could make the case that the United Kingdom has some elements of bicameral legislature.
Yeah. Like,
Um,
isn't there? Is it's like House of Commons and like the
House of
other?
Lords, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's actually fairly common
Hmm.
for there to be a bicameral legislator. But the problem in the U.S. is that one house, at least now, one house is majority Democrat usually, and the other house is majority Republican.
Hmm.
So that makes the bipartisan problem even worse because each house is ruled by a different party. So it's like there's fighting within each house, and then there's fighting between the houses,
Hmm.
and there's fighting with the with the judicial branch and the president. So it's very extremely divided and polarized.
Mm.
So that's why people probably criticize the United States bicameral legislature. I
Yeah.
don't think the founders imagined regions having such different political views, but that's what has made each house like drastically different.
Mhm. Yeah. Like the Constitution was written before there was even like really parties, like before there was a two-party system. Um, but yeah, definitely there like political gridlock can occur. But then sometimes there will be an instance where both houses have the same. I think it was what like 2016 to 2018, wasn't it? Both I think both houses were majority Republican, and then also the president. So it was like had a lot
Uh,
of ability to pass laws. But yeah, right now I think yeah, House is Democrat, Senate is Republican, and then President's Republican. So that causes some gridlock. Um,
uh, I'm getting the stats
he's
right
getting the
now.
stats.
Yeah,
Yeah.
2016 there was 241 Republicans
Mhm.
in the House and 190 Democrats.
Okay. So so yeah. And an interesting thing about the House of Representatives, like especially, I guess this is just the last thing because we've sort of said everything, is that oh yeah, well, there's a few more rules. So the House of Representatives, each state needs to have at least one, even if it has a really low population, like Wyoming. Um, and also the Constitution. It's interesting. They actually in this section they spell out how many each state will get to start off with, but then eventually it changes according to the census. But I just find it interesting that their little like ruling here on like how everything will start off, even though it will change and like now it's totally obsolete. Like they list stuff like like Massachusetts will have 8 House of Representative people. I just find it interesting that that's like in there forever, and I find it interesting just because like the amendment system, you can only add, but you can't take away. So theoretically, over time, the Constitution would just get longer and longer. Um, like
Well, it's
if
a
you were to
thing of
just read everything.
style for them
Yeah,
to remove something like that.
yeah, exactly.
But they have removed other things that have actually conflicted. Like, I'm pretty sure the 3/5 compromise is like technically removed
Mhm.
because of the amendments.
Well,
I
it's
mean,
still in
it's
there.
going to remain in the original
Yeah.
document, though.
Well, the website I'm using with the text, it's in parentheses, and then there's a
Uh,
little notation that says this has been altered or removed by this amendment. Um, but
Yeah,
yeah, so
18. It was in 1868.
mhm,
Section 2 of the 14th Amendment superseded Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3, which is the
mhm,
3/5 compromise.
yeah,
And it explicitly repealed the 3/5 compromise.
mhm,
So 1868,
yeah,
by the 14th Amendment, is what gunned it down.
uh-huh, yeah.
That's what it was.
But yeah, so in general, the House of Representatives, I would say it's the most beholden to the people because they have 2-year terms, whereas the Senate has 6-year terms. So if you don't like what your senator has done, you might have to wait upwards of 6 years to get them out of there. Whereas the House of Representatives, they have to like stay on their feet essentially, otherwise they'll be voted out in just 2 years. Um, and what else? And I mean, this was sort of by design. It's supposed to be for the population, for the congressional districts, and because like 2 years, everyone is up for reelection. Whereas in the Senate, every 2 years, only a third of the people are up for reelection. What happens is that you can get really big sweeps during midterm elections. That's what happened during the 2018 midterm election. There was a large sweep from the House of Representatives being majority Republican to majority Democrat. So yeah, very like responsive to the people, I think. So that's all I have to say for this one.
Yeah, I think we can head on over to the next one.
All right. Yeah, so section 3. So this section is all about the Senate. Oh, I should have put in I am the Senate for the meme,
Right.
for the picture here.
yes.
But yes, so I am the Senate. That is what this section goes over. And yeah, so let's see. So it sort of outlines how there will be 2 senators per state, how you have to be, what is it, 30 to be a senator, and what's the citizenship? I don't know what it
9 years as a
is. 9
citizen,
years?
and then you have to reside in the state you represent.
All right. So yeah, kind of similar to the House of Representatives, except the requirements are even greater. Um, so if you're 29, no dice, you can't be in the Senate. Um, but But yeah, so the senators serve a term of 6 years. However, this section also sort of outlines that the first senators that are to be elected, they are to be divided equally into 3 groups. And the first group is going to stay on for 6 years. The second group is only going to stay for 4 years. And then the third group is only going to stay for 2 years. And from then on, it'll be a staggered system. And I think that's interesting. I think it's a good idea with terms. Well, I don't know. I think that 6-year terms are a little long, like even longer than the president. But what I do like is that it would become sort of lopsided if everyone was reelected every 6 years. It would make it very like monumental, kind of like how the House of Representatives has large sweeps. I kind of like how this makes the Senate a bit more stable. So.
Yeah, I think it would be great if people went to the elections in between presidential elections,
Mhm.
because that's when congressmen or congress people and then senators would be up for re-election.
Mhm.
It's tough because turnouts for elections pretty much drop after the presidential election, and even the presidential election doesn't have that great of a turnout. So I think in the early republic, those that met the crazy requirements that were needed to vote were more likely to vote.
That turnout, 2016 was a 55%.
Yeah, the midterm elections get horrible turnouts. And it's so strange, especially considering how much thought was put into this article of the Constitution and how it was meant that the legislator or the legislature was to be more powerful, whereas the president wasn't supposed to be as powerful. But now people care, I would say, way more about the presidential election than they do about their congressional and senatorial, elections. So it's interesting.
In 2014, there was only a turnout of 36% of eligible voters. So.
Wow. Yeah. So let's see what else. Oh yes. So this article also gives the Senate the power to impeach people. It's the impeachment trials with 2/3 of the vote, whereas the House of Representatives will send the articles of impeachment, but the Senate has to actually convict the person. Not necessarily the president, although typically people think the president, but like the justices can be impeached, like the Supreme Court justices. Really, anybody kind of can be impeached by the Senate.
If it is the president, there's a special rule that the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, or just in general, presides over the trial.
Yep.
But in either case, 2/3 majority is required to convict.
Yeah. So another thing about the Senate is that since each state has 2 senators, there will always be an even number of senators. So there will always be a problem of ties and tie breaking. And what they decided for the tiebreaker should be the vice president. So the vice president is the president of the Senate, and he will make the final decision if the Senate is split. And there's also supposed to be a president pro tempore, which means president for a time, who is in charge of the Senate while the vice president is doing other vice president things. So, so it's interesting.
We have chat.
We have chat. All right, let's see. We've got Jan McCarthy, 1975. Keep me entertained at work. Nice. I did not know that he was at work. That's fascinating. Where is he working?
He's working at McDonald's.
Oh, okay.
He's at the Mickey D's.
And they let him listen to the live stream? That's fun.
Yeah.
I'm going to report him.
Just report him?
Yeah.
No, I bet he has, some sort of, buds in for listening. Spy gear.
He's got the AirPods in.
Yeah, maybe he's got AirPods.
He actually handles microtransactions for a multi-billion-dollar corporation.
Yeah. He's got a very, very high position. But yeah, so what else about the Senate? I've kind of said a lot.
So going back to the idea of why we have a bicameral system, the Senate being balanced between all the states, regardless of population, all of them have 2, regardless of whether it's Texas or, again, like Wyoming or Wisconsin or any of those. I don't know, I think that's definitely one of the smartest ideas that was laid down in the original Constitution. Because the fact that they ingrained that, because again, they couldn't really predict where people were going to go. Like they had no idea what a Texas even was all the way back then. They didn't know what a Wyoming or what a California is, or what Hawaii. They didn't even know that existed.
Yeah.
So the fact that they're like, okay, we got to keep all the states equal in some capacity, because again, they didn't even know really how many states there was going to be. I think it's one of the smartest moves that they pulled so that they could plan for the future. And senators do have a decent amount of power, If there's only 2 per state, you have 50% of the power in the Senate from your state. I think I would enjoy being a senator honestly.
Yeah.
If I was to go into politics, I think that is probably where I would focus my efforts.
Yeah, I feel like Senate is like, if you consider the ratio of amount of power versus amount of scrutiny, it's probably like senator is probably one of the best positions in the US because the president, like, the most power, but also, like, for one person, the most power, but also a lot of scrutiny um, as the president. Whereas senators may get a brief headline like, oh, they voted no on this bill, but that doesn't sell news. What
It
sells
doesn't sound.
news is president did something. So that's sort of how the news is. So yeah, I feel like Senate is a very good position for that ratio for like power versus scrutiny. So yeah. All right, should I go to the next slide?
I think that is everything on the Senate.
Yeah. All right. So now we get section 4, and we've got a little calendar here because this section of Article 1 sort of outlines when and where the elections are supposed to be, and like when and where the houses are supposed to meet. Um, so yeah, they say, Congress must assemble at least once every year, which, that's kind of the bare minimum. Just meet once a year if you're gonna be a senator. I mean, I just find that funny. Um, but yeah, in the past, with transportation, and there's actually like some amendments to the Constitution that were like mostly due to advancements in transportation because um, in the past, if you were a senator from like you know, New Hampshire and you had to go down to Washington, D.C., or if you're from Georgia and you had to go up to Washington, D.C., that would be a bit of a trek. It would be a bit of a haul. But now it's quicker train, plane, car. But in the past, it wasn't as easy. And so meeting once a year at least was still like low. So it was just the minimum, but it wasn't as low as that would be today. Um, but yeah, so it also outlines that the houses will decide sort of when they meet on their own, sort of pick the times that they want to meet. Um, and yeah, and so then it also outlines how the elections will be dealt with by the states or districts of where these people's constituents are. So yeah.
Basically up to the states, and
Yeah.
then Congress can alter the states' decisions if
Mhm.
they need to.
Yeah. So it's a little quick one, just sort of scheduling, I guess, management.
Give it up for Article 1, Section 4.
Yeah. Not as monumental as the others, but still important.
The other
Each
one
piece.
outlined the power of this nation, and then this one's like, can you guys show up like at least once every year?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
On the first Monday in December, please show up.
Yeah. Although that has been altered by Amendment 20.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they're just like first Monday in December. So yeah, that's just a quick one. I guess let's go to the next one. All right. So now we got section 5, and this is more sort of rules, rules. It's a ton of rules about how they have to behave. So let's see. I'm trying to remember all of these. I read this, but I'm trying. I read this before, but now I need to.
So,
Okay.
first
Yeah.
rule is that they, both the House and the Senate, judge the results of their elections.
Mhm.
And they basically have freedom to select further qualifications. And although a majority of each is present is necessary to use like their larger legislative power, smaller numbers of each house can be on like the day-to-day basis.
So that's like
And an interesting
committees
thing
and
is,
stuff, right?
yeah.
Okay.
An interesting thing is they can actually penalize members that aren't there and force them to show up. So if you're playing hooky from the Senate meeting, they can issue a writ to make you pull up.
Nice. That's funny. Yeah, if you're off playing golf for too long, or whatever politicians do in their spare time, I don't know, paint over their
That's pretty
reptile
much.
scales.
I think that's pretty much it. It's golf.
Uh-huh.
And campaigning for their next
Yeah,
election.
yeah, exactly. Um, but yeah, so there's also supposed to be a journal of their proceedings for both houses, and they gotta write down what happens in the journal. And if 20% of either house like says so, then they have to like write down the voting of the senators and representatives. So if no one really cares, then they don't actually have to put it in, which is interesting. But people often do care because when someone runs for president, for instance, and they were a senator or a congressman, they always say, "Oh, look at their voting record," like they're disingenuous or something, or they are genuous based on their voting record. Um, so yeah, so it's important that they have this. It's great because it allows there to be government transparency. Of course, it does actually say that if there's a matter that needs to be kept secret for the safety of the nation, like classified documents, then they don't have to release that. But they have to release things that like they can release to the public without harming the nation, which I think is great because government
Yeah.
transparency is very important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So another specific punishment that they can do, which is Section 5, Clause 2,
Mhm.
if they, first of all, they get to agree on their rules of conduct. And I personally think, like, filibusters should be not allowed.
Mm,
But
yeah.
anyway, if members don't follow their rules of conduct, they can be expelled with a 2/3 vote.
Yep. Kicked out.
An interesting thing is Preston Brooks, one of the most infamous. Wait,
Dude
was
with the
he?
cane.
Yeah, he was a representative. He's the guy that caned Charles Sumner,
Okay.
like violently
Oh
attacked
yeah.
this guy.
Okay. Yeah, I remember
He did not get expelled. They didn't have a 2/3 majority to
that.
expel him.
Wow. They just let him stay. He just, beat someone
Yeah.
up and then went back to his seat. Just
I
casually
think they
sits down.
they arrested him or
Okay.
something. He paid like a $40 fine, but then they didn't expel him from the rest of the like session.
Wow.
So
That's crazy.
Legend.
Legend.
Living legend.
He's dead, probably. Right? Yeah, he's dead.
yeah, he's dead by now. He supported slavery.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so
Well, I
he's
guess
he's dead.
he's a dead unlegend.
Unlegend.
He's a,
Yeah. He's a dead violent
well,
man that beat someone with a cane, and got away with it with a $40 fine. But yeah, so
yeah, but the man behind the slaughter.
the man behind the slaughter. Yeah. So another part is that it says that like neither house like will meet for more than 3 days unless the other house says it's okay, which I find kind of interesting. I don't really know the purpose of that.
I guess it's a check. Like, what if the House could meet, or actually, it'd probably be more likely that the Senate could meet because there are, less senators,
Yeah.
at least now. The Senate could meet, but the House couldn't. So the Senate kept meeting and doing stuff. Well, the House had to wait to meet.
Okay.
And then the House could be like, we don't want the Senate meeting because that would undermine it.
Yeah.
It was a check, but I think it's kind of antiquated now that those houses can meet pretty much whenever they want.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. But that's kind of it for this section. All right. Cool. Yeah, I'll go to the next one. Okay. Now we've got a little paycheck here from Company Incorporated. I love this stock photo. Yeah. So this one says that the senators and representatives shall receive compensation for their mesothelioma. No, for serving, their duty in the legislature. So, yeah.
What is it?
Yep, old joke. Yeah, they will be paid by the Treasury of the United States. So yeah, this basically gives them their paychecks. it doesn't say how much, obviously, because that will change over time. And there's an amendment that the most recent amendment actually that says that they can't give themselves a raise. Like it'll have to wait until the end of the like session for it to like come into play. Uh, but yeah, so yeah, let's see what else do we have here. It's also like some checks and balances here, sort of about separation of the branches, basically saying that the senators and representatives have to stay in their lane. They can't like double time. They can't serve another position in the government. That's their only position that they're allowed to have. And if they already have a different position before they can like enter the legislature, they have to resign from it, which is pretty good. But yeah, so this gives them their money. What's their salary? I'll look up their salary.
Yeah.
Senate.
This also actually protects them from being arrested while in attendance, except for like high crimes.
Mhm.
So if they ruled that P. Brooks caning that dude was actually like somehow a misdemeanor,
Mhm.
he couldn't have been arrested while in attendance. So that's another interesting loophole.
What?
Yeah.
Not the man.
Yeah. So okay. So the salary of the Senate is $174,000 per annum, not per year, per annum. Um, and for the House of Representatives, let's see. Oh, it's different. Wait. Okay, so it's different for the leaders. So the leaders get a bit more. They get 193,400, and the members get the same amount as the Senate, 174,000. So that's interesting. But yeah, so they get fairly well compensated, I would say. That's quite a bit of money. Um,
And they rely on donations too, obviously,
that's true.
for
Yeah.
their campaign funds, but also sometimes like speaking engagements is how they make a lot of money.
Yeah, yeah, you gotta, skirt under the edge with $1 million speaking engagement. It's not a donation. It's just a speaking engagement. I provide $1 million worth of speaking. Um, a little suspicious, but we all know how the game is played. I suppose it's politics, but yeah. So you know, uh, this is just another little section in here. So not like crazy monumental government building, but just sort of like more specifics, practicalities. But I don't have much more to say on this. All right,
Yeah, I think we are Gucci.
nice. All right, next section. So this is about the veto. All right, and let's see. Okay, so okay, so there are a few things in here because some of these sections are more like broad, so then I just pick one picture. Um, but yeah, so basically, this outlines that a bill, after it passes the House of Representatives and the Senate, it goes to the president, and the president can say no. And if the president says no, then two-thirds of the Senate and House of Representatives can say no, you again, double Uno reverse cards, um, and they can pass the bill anyway. But yeah, so that's just a little one part of it. But
Yeah, the president has 10 days to use
mm,
his veto power, so he can't just wait it out.
yeah.
So that's an interesting thing we added. But also in Section 7 is the process for revenue bills,
hmm
which were treated as something different because of previous fears of taxation.
hmm
But revenue bills have to originate in the House, and then the Senate can change or concur with them.
Okay.
That's the specific path that revenue-related bills have to go through.
Interesting. Yeah. But yeah, then there's the 10-day rule like about vetoes is outlined more in Article 2 about the president because there is like one instance where if he waits the 10 days the bill won't be passed, but there are like most of the time if he waits the 10 days the bill will just be passed anyways. But yeah, it's like called the pocket veto. So yeah. But yeah, so this is just another little section here. Um, yeah. Let's see. Anything else?
These fun sections.
Yeah. Anything else to
Yeah, look,
say on this one? Yeah. All right. I'll go to the next one. Okay. Here we go. Section 8. So this section is about taxes, and it's a big bullet list, I think. Yeah, it's a big bullet list. So
Basically, all of the powers of Congress.
yeah, so it's the powers of Congress, and one of them being taxation. Um, yeah, so that's the yeah. So there's stuff like borrow money on the credit of the United States, so like debts and stuff. I won't go through all of them, but establish post offices and post roads, things like that. Are there any like
Interstate Commerce
key
Clause is
ones?
pretty important.
Yeah, that's used.
Maintaining the Navy and the Army, declaring war, court systems, securing rights for authors, inventors, and like scientists is an interesting one.
Yeah, so that's patents and copyrights, is sort of outlined there. Yeah.
And then there's
laws, the law clause, where it says to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers and all yada yada yada, that part.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that clause is a specific source of debate in terms of how to interpret the Constitution, because some people are like the necessary and proper clause basically means that the federal government can make any law it wants as long as it's ensuring the powers vested in the Constitution. So that's definitely like a more federalist stance on the Constitution. And they put that in as well as like the supremacy clause in order to ensure that the Congress was still supreme law of the land and the states were not as powerful.
Yeah, so the supremacy law or clause basically says that if there's a law, if there are two laws that conflict with each other, but one is just a state law and one is a federal law, then the federal law will supersede, so it will take precedence. So if a state says you can't do this, and the Congress says yes you can, then you can, I guess, right?
But what about marijuana? Like states have made it legal.
Well, yeah,
federally it's still illegal, right?
Mm-hmm. I think it's that the federal law can specifically like say, all right, if a state wants to, they can do this. So, so I suppose the supremacy clause is more of a by default thing, because you can write a bill that says, this bill, like blah 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 blah, and then at the end say, if a state has a different law about it, their law can win. Essentially, like you can program that into a bill if you want to. But just by default, if it's not specified, it'll be the federal bill, and that will end up being like a courts thing, because of laws and stuff. You have to consider which one. Like if a state like puts you in jail for something, and then the federal law like contradicts with it and says that you can, then there would be a big legal battle. But according to the Constitution, you should be able to win it. So yeah. All right. That's it. So yeah, let's go to the next section.
That was a big boy.
Yeah.
That was definitely very important.
Yeah. All right. So this is section 9, and this section is very anti-nobility, anti-monarchy. It basically says, well, again, it's varied. Like there are a few things in here, but one of the big things that it says is that Congress cannot give out nobility like ranks, so it can't make you a count, like the Count of Rhode Island, not allowed, and the states can't do that either. And furthermore, they're just kind of like sticking it to the man, because they're like, anyone that has any rank of nobility in another country like cannot be a representative here. So if you were given like say like a count thing, that title, if you were given that title in Britain, but then you moved into the United States and you've lived there for like 7 years and been a citizen, if you want to be on the House of Representatives, you would have to basically you'd have to cast off, throw away your rank of nobility. You'd have to say, I'm done with this.
Yeah.
So you'd have to like
King George
reject.
could have made a big brain play, actually. He could have just knighted everyone in America, and then none of them could have became representatives.
Yeah. Well, you can still like reject it essentially.
Yeah,
And
probably.
sort of like renounce it. That's what they would have to do if you wanted to get into the legislature, and you had a like nobility status. You would have to renounce it and say like, "Oh, I am not noble anymore." But yeah, he could have just done that. That would have been funny.
Yeah. So this section also has just a bunch of miscellaneous things
Mhm.
that they needed to put in. So it has it prevents essentially without mentioning the word slave, it prevents the slave trade from being banned until 1808,
Mhm.
but allows a tax on imported people,
Yeah.
which is obviously altered now.
Yeah.
Then it says that the writ of habeas corpus can't be suspended unless there's like a direct threat on the public. And it has only been suspended a few times, I think, during war. Like during the Civil War, Lincoln suspended it.
Mhm.
It
Yeah.
also has no ex post facto law, which basically means that you can't make something illegal after it already happens. So if I, ate an entire pickle in one bite, they could not pass a law saying that doing so would be illegal after I had eaten the pickle and then convict me of it.
Yeah. If you did it again, that is when they
If I
would
did it again,
convict
though,
you. Yeah. Which
then I would not have learned my lesson.
yeah, that's definitely he would have not learned his lesson. But yeah, that's definitely an important one, the ex post facto, because otherwise it would just sort of like there could be a lot of corruption otherwise if you didn't have that ex post facto law, because it could just basically be like, okay, we don't like this guy, let's find something that he did and make it illegal. Um, so yeah, that's an important one. Um, yeah. So
It bans export duties, makes the taxes like proportional to the amount of people according to the census.
mhm.
It makes it more difficult to draw money from the treasury, and then it allows only Congress to regulate uh, commerce
Okay.
between states. It's pretty much just a bunch of miscellaneous stuff.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So let's go to the last section here. Section 10. So yeah, one of the pieces of Section 10 basically says that a state can't make a treaty with another country. So like Virginia here, I have the Virginia flag, I think, can't just say like, oh, France, let's like make a deal. No, like it basically says that states like they're part of the United States, and the United States can make treaties with other nations, but um, the states aren't autonomous to do so. And I just thought this meme fit very well for that statement. So yeah, let's see what else. There's also a few more things in here. Yeah, there's one that says so the states can't make their own money other than like gold and silver, because that is just universally accepted as money, gold and silver. But other than that, like the states can't make money because before the states actually did have different currencies. So like if you wanted to go to like Massachusetts and you were in, New York or Pennsylvania, you'd have to like convert your money and it would be a pain. And so this sort of made it more of a union, like smoothing things out. And it's kind of interesting because in this way, it sort of took what Europe was before the EU and sort of like established the Eurozone like 200 years before it was cool. Um, Maybe 150 years before it was cool. But yeah, so it sort of got rid of the states' money and made it like all uniform, which is very important because it would be so inconvenient if like just going over state lines you had to convert all your currency. Yeah, that would suck. So yeah.
Yeah, with currency, one of the biggest conspiracies is how is Abraham Lincoln on the penny that they started making national currency in 1787?
That is a
Like,
conspiracy theory.
pretty big conspiracy right there.
R/. And he's also on the $5 bill.
Oh yeah, they just had the foresight. They knew he was going to come
Yeah.
along.
Yeah.
They were like, "Who's this weird beard guy that you keep throwing on all the currency?" I don't know. You know?
You'll find out soon enough.
You'll
I have a
find
feeling.
it.
Yeah, don't worry, you'll find it.
Yeah. They consulted with a psychic. Yeah. Anyways, so yeah, that's Article 1, you know.
Yeah.
So
Well, beefy
mhm.
article.
Yeah.
Beefiest article,
Yeah.
if you may.
I may.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's definitely the one that is like it gives the most power to the legislative. It's where that's outlined. It outlines the legislature, and like we said, it needs the most stuff because it has the most power,
Yeah.
obviously. And I think that holds up still to today. Like
Mhm.
still today, the legislative branch is the most powerful branch. I would argue.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that way. That's actually what they intended. So a lot of the time when people are interpreting the Constitution, they're like, "This isn't what the founding fathers um, intended for." But I think that this is one of the rare things that they actually did intend for.
Yeah.
The legislative branch always being the most powerful branch. Then there's the debate of which is more powerful, the judicial or the executive.
Yeah. So it was outlined as executive because it comes second. They kind of did it in order of what they thought was most important. Um, but yeah. So yeah, let's move on to the executive branch. Yeah. So
So this is the big man or
yeah.
woman, him or herself.
Historically, yeah.
Historically, it's been
Uh-huh.
big man,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
in the future, it could be a bigger woman.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah, so this is about the president and the vice president. Those are the only two like executive positions that are specifically outlined here. Although it like says that the president can make a cabinet, but like a cabinet isn't, I guess, 100% like required. Although, it's already a stressful job as is, having to handle all that. Like the reason they make the cabinet, like the cabinet has to be approved by the Senate, but they don't specifically say you need to have a cabinet. Like George Washington had a cabinet of 4, whereas now I think it's like 16. So, I mean, as the nation has expanded, there's more to subdelegate.
I want to see a president without a cabinet.
He just bulks the
he just-
system.
One man army. I know the candidate for the job.
Who?
It's actually a Pokemon.
Okay.
Executor.
Executor. Oh my gosh. Yeah, exactly. But yeah. So let's just get started with Article 2, Section 1. Okay. So this outlines the presidency, essentially. It outlines that there will be a president, how they will be elected, and the requirements to be president. So like very kind of like what Articles 1, Sections 2 and 3 did for the House and the Senate, Article 2, Section 1 does for the president. So yeah.
This is what we found out was the Electoral College, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I got the little
That's
Electoral College
clause
up there.
2 and 3.
Yeah. Although it has been
Check out-
changed since. Yeah. Oh yeah, check out 128 seconds video on the Electoral College. But yeah, so I actually find it really interesting that the way that we do the Electoral College now is different than how it used to be and how it was originally outlined. So originally, each elector had 2 votes for president, and so they would pick their 2 favorite people, which is sort of like a lot of these voting systems like that get thrown around, like the ranked voting system, except on the level of the executor rather than or elector rather than like swear to God, on the elector rather than the person, like the individual. But yeah, so the electors originally would cast 2 votes, and then whoever got the most votes would be the president, and whoever got the second most would be the vice president. But that caused some conflict early on because the vice president, would be the runner up. And as, the two-party system began to form, it became a problem because they wouldn't work well together. It would be like it would be like if Hillary Clinton was the vice president today. Like that would
Yeah.
just be such a crazy situation.
The specific thing that ended it was actually Aaron Burr
Yeah.
deciding to lead a separatist movement.
Mhm.
He was actually the same party as Thomas Jefferson.
Yep.
They tied the votes because of this
Yeah.
clause that you have to vote for two candidates. One can be from your state, but one had to be from a different state than you. So all of the Dem reps, as they were, voted for Jefferson, and then Burr as their second. And it ended up in them actually being tied for first.
Yeah.
And then Jefferson won in a landslide because
then the House
gets to break the tie.
Yeah.
But Burr did not want to be VP for very long, and Jefferson did not want him as his VP.
So then they passed.
They made the 12th Amendment.
Yeah, the 12th Amendment changed it so that they would be like, okay, yeah, this is kind of dumb. We'll specifically say who we want the president to be and specifically say who we want the vice president to be. So the electors still cast two votes, but instead of just being in one pool, they are separated out. But yeah, it's interesting because the Democratic Republicans and the Federalists both pretty much made the same plan, but the Democratic Republicans effed it up. So the Federalists, what they did was they're like, okay, so we'll have everyone vote for John Adams, and then everybody but one elector will put their second vote into who we want to be vice president, and then one person will just, cast a random vote to just a random person. And that way, they thought, like, okay, well, so what ended up happening was they had 65 votes for John Adams and 64 for their second. So if they had won, they would have gotten the presidency and the vice presidency. But the the Democratic Republicans, they had 73, but both for Jefferson and Burr. And I just feel like whoever was that one guy that was supposed to just vote for a random person, like he messed it up. Imagine being the one guy responsible for creating an entire U.S. amendment just by messing up. I just find that funny. So that's a big thing here. But yeah, it outlines that the Electoral College will give each state the amount of votes equivalent, or the amount of electors equivalent to however many congressmen it has total, so senators and House of Representatives people. And it also outlines, the president will have a 4-year term, and so will the vice president. They will serve the same 4-year term. And it doesn't actually impose the 2-year term limit. That's a later amendment. But it was basically George Washington just sort of, he was like, yeah, I'm good. I'm out. I'm a head out. When he was done after 2 terms, he went to retire. But he could have probably been elected a 3rd term if he wanted to. I mean, he probably could have gone on until he died. Like, he was very popular. It was almost unanimous when he was voted in.
He would have won every election, but he chose to exercise his civic virtue in stepping down. And he also thought wrongly that if he left, people would listen to his ideas that he expressed in his farewell address. He's like, I'm stepping down. You guys make sure you do this. And
they didn't.
We did not do that.
They didn't do this.
If you look at his farewell, this is kind of a tangent here, but if you look at his farewell address, he's basically like, stay out of foreign affairs. We didn't do that. Avoid bipartisan politics. We didn't do that. And then, watch out. Make sure that the Western lands unite the country and not divide them. That didn't exactly happen either.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. So that's interesting. But yeah, it was actually FDR. It was like it was an unwritten agreement after Washington. One thing that he did, I guess, keep in effect was that every other president after him was like, okay, yeah, I'll resign after, or not resign, but I won't run for re-election after 2 terms. Except FDR was like, nah, I'm just going to keep going. And he kept going until he eventually died of polio. And then the Congress was like, okay, we gotta we got to make this more explicit because he didn't really listen to the unwritten rule. But yeah, so it also outlines it also lists the requirements to be president, right? Yeah, so it's you have to be older than 35. You must have been a U.S. resident, like a citizen, for at least 14 years. Um, or no, the citizen part is like part three, but
You have to be natural
yeah,
born, and
yeah.
you have, or a citizen at the time of the Constitution being ratified.
Hmm.
So it is impossible for a first generation immigrant to become president.
Hmm. Yeah. No, just pull the other qualification. I was alive. I was a citizen when the Constitution was written. Just be like, hello. But yeah. Oh, and then it also says the presidential oath, which doesn't actually include "So help me God." That's just what everyone has decided to add anyway. Um, but yeah, so it's all very specific. But yeah, I don't know if much else to say on this. Nope. All right. So let's go to the next section. Okay. So section two. Uh, this one, it talks about some of the president's powers. Um, and two of the powers that he has, or they have, the president, whoever the president may be, um, the president has the power to pardon criminals of crimes other than, like treason, like high crimes and misdemeanors. Pretty much, a president can't just, pardon themselves if they're, which would just be
Yeah,
the
he
ultimate
also
power.
can't pardon people that are impeached. Like even
Yeah,
if a different officer got
yeah.
impeached, he couldn't pardon them
Yeah,
either.
so he can't deal with impeachment, but he can pardon people of, like lesser crimes. And then it also sort of outlines how the Supreme Court justices are picked, by the president, but then with the approval of Congress. So, yeah. Let's see. Anything else in this section that you have, Zach?
I think there's a loophole
Mm.
with clause 3
Hmm.
that Trump joked about using
Oh,
once. It's basically like the president can fill as many vacancies, and this is also in section 3 as well. The next section,
hmm.
they can fill vacancies if the Senate is not in session. So technically, the president could suspend the houses from meeting and then
Okay.
just fill them with whoever he wanted by commission. But
Wow.
the commissions would have to be approved
Oh, okay.
Eventually. And I don't
Okay.
think any president has actually used that power before.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it is interesting. It also, says that the president is, in charge of the Army and the Navy. He's the commander in chief. That's where we get that. And this also, yeah, this also talks about how he can, the president can establish executive departments and appoint secretaries, Secretary of State, Secretary of Treasury, and then all the new departments as well. He can appoint people to those departments so that he can have help.
There you go.
He's bugging.
Yeah, because it would be difficult to do everything. Um, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Definitely, Matt.
Oh, what's up? Is there a problem?
You just cut out for like a brief second.
Okay. Yeah, I was just talking about the executive departments and how the president can put in like a Secretary of State uh, and all the other secretaries now with all the different departments, the cabinet essentially. But yeah, and that the cabinet has to be approved by the Senate or Senate and House. But yeah, that's it for me. Shall we go to the next section?
Next section.
All right. So we got section 3. So this section is about the State of the Union address, which doesn't have to be an address. Like it doesn't have to be like verbal, although that's sort of the tradition now. It can just be a letter. It's like, here, take it.
You just send text.
Yeah.
Like, here's my State of the Union.
Emergency alert.
Emergency alert. Yeah, so it basically says, from time to time, the president shall give a State of the Union. I love that phrasing, just from time to time. Uh, like seemingly vague, but the tradition is once a year. Um, and yeah, so I think it was like from Jefferson until Woodrow Wilson, or Jefferson until Taft. It was they just sent in a letter. George Washington would actually speak to the people, but Woodrow Wilson decided to resume George Washington's, State of the Union addresses verbally, and ever since then, in 1913, all of the presidents have been doing that, just State of the Union addresses to the Congress, essentially. Even though it's televised now and like everyone can watch it, it's supposed to be like it's for the Senate and House of Representatives, right? Yeah, for the Congress. Just about how things are going, essentially. I mean, State of the Union. Yeah.
It's also interesting that it says he in the Constitution, because
Yeah.
if you specifically, it's in relation to the president, he shall from
Yeah.
time to time give Congress. So I think,
Yeah.
and it uses he throughout the
Yeah.
entire thing.
Well, I think here, in the past more so, they used he as like neutral and masculine, kind of like how in Spanish, if you don't
Yeah.
know, you would say like L, but now it's more common to say like they for neutral. Like people usually say if they don't know, they say oh they will do this. But in the past, that was just he. So yeah, that's just the archaic language, I suppose. Um, but yeah, also that the president will receive ambassadors from other nations and will, head of state has to be like not figurehead, like they actually do things, but they sort of have to be the face of the nation because an ambassador can't just come in and have, 100 senators yelling at them all day. Like that would be impractical. So yeah. Yeah, so that's it. That's it from me for this section. Shall I move on?
The next section
All
is
right.
just a quick one.
Yeah, so this section is about impeachment and what the president can be impeached for. Um, but not just the president, the vice president, and all the civil officers of the United States. I'll just read it because it's so short. So it says, the president, vice president, and all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. So that's where you get that. Um, so yeah, if the president, goes against the nation or accepts a bribe or, you know, other high crimes and misdemeanors is kind of vague. Do you have any idea, like, Zach, like what they're more referring to with that? Or is it intentionally vague so that, like, if the president does something whack that everyone agrees is whack, they can sort of call him out on it?
Well, they specifically define treason,
Mm-hmm.
I think, at a later point in
Okay.
the Constitution. So they're probably referring to that. In terms of bribery, it's going to be like political graft, taking money from someone to pass a specific bill or whatever. But then the other part is basically like if they murder someone,
Mm-hmm.
that they could be impeached for that.
Okay.
They can't pardon themselves. It's interesting though because impeachment cases, most of them have been acquitted,
Yeah.
and it's weird the grounds that they raise. Specifically, in Donald Trump's impeachment case,
Mm-hmm.
he was charged with the abuse of power and obstruction of Congress. So, in my opinion, from this definition, as outlined in Section 4, it's kind of hard to see where abuse of power would fall if it wasn't specifically treason or bribery.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't say anything specifically about obstruction of Congress. In fact, I would actually say that if you look at Section 3, the one we just caused, it actually gives the president the right to adjourn the houses in cases of disagreement.
Okay. Interesting.
But still, there was definitely uh, an argument to be made that Trump abused his power,
Mhm.
especially with Ukraine, considering it's a foreign nation. That seems to lend itself more to the Constitution's definition of treason.
Mhm.
And an interesting thing about Trump's impeachment case was that Mitt Romney was the first U.S. senator ever to cast the vote to convict the president of his own political party.
Huh.
So
Wow.
props to Mitt Romney for
Yeah.
standing up against party lines.
Yeah. Wow, that's interesting. So impeachment has always been like super political, I guess, like always on party lines.
Yeah.
That's
In my
interesting.
opinion, it should be. It's stupid to me why it's the only trial that isn't by jury.
Hmm. Yeah.
Like, they specifically designated impeachment as the only trial where there doesn't need to be jury. But I
Mhm.
think if they want officials to be held accountable to the people, there should be a jury for an
Hmm.
impeachment trial.
Yeah.
And it could be even like a jury with members from every state or something
Yeah.
along those lines.
I do kind of get the argument against because like for something as like important, I guess, as the president, they don't want it to just be some random person, essentially. But yeah, I don't know. It sort of does appeal to like demarchy, which we talked about a while back, which is like the random selection of people.
Mm-hmm.
The only concern would be that it wouldn't be as random, like as because when they select a jury, like for jury duty, they always sort of like they reject a ton of people. A ton of people will go to court, if you're brought in for jury duty, and in all likelihood, you're not going to end up on the trial. So that could be sort of tampered with essentially, because what they usually do for a jury is say like, oh, okay, do you know the person that's being accused? Because that would sway your decision and kick you off. Um, so I get that there could be like concerns on like an impeachment case. They could say like, oh well, you just know the person, and it's difficult because everyone knows of the president, so you wouldn't really be
Yeah,
able to
it would be
find an
hard to assess
unbiased.
people's biases.
Yeah.
And like in ancient Greece, when they practiced ostracism,
Hmm.
it easily became corrupt. So I could see a similar thing happening.
Yeah.
But even so, I think it would make more sense if it wasn't a trial by jury of random selection. If it was trial by the judicial branch, where like
Oh, okay.
the 30 highest ranking judicial officials became the jury that decided
Hmm.
if the president had violated what is specifically mentioned in the Constitution.
Yeah.
I feel like that way, because, Supreme Court justices don't have to affiliate with a political party, it would
Hmm.
become less partisan and it would become more like the concept of judicial review itself.
Yeah. I get that. I think the one difficulty though is that the Supreme Court justices are chosen by the president, so then it would be like,
True. And
yeah.
even though they have lifetime sentences, it would
Hmm.
be probably
Yeah.
it wouldn't happen for the
Yeah.
person that got appointed by the president to then convict that president.
Yeah, it would. Yeah, and the president could theoretically, if he knew that like the Supreme Court was like brewing to impeach him, um, if he had control of like Congress, like the same party, he could pretty much just pack the courts with like people he likes and then just shut it down. Um, so I don't know. I think there are flaws, but I think it's a difficult system um,
Yeah.
to find. I don't know. Maybe this is just an idea. Instantaneous re-election. Just if the articles of impeachment are filed, then in 3 months there will be another election, essentially. Which I don't know. That would be weird too because then people would have to draw up a campaign. But anyways, that's how it is in the system. It's the Senate and well, yeah, the Senate that decides, as well as the House of Representatives to draft the articles. But yeah. So
The
yeah.
founding fathers probably had the exact same debate that you guys just
Hmm.
had because of the ideas presented at the Constitutional Conference.
Yeah.
If that's the name of it, there
I think it was a
might be called
convention. Yeah.
convention. The
Con
Constitutional
con.
Convention. The con.
The con, yeah.
It's interesting that we're still having the same debates that they had.
Yeah.
Because they're so incremental and crucial to like what the nation's built on, and even they couldn't really agree on stuff. So
Yeah.
we have the burden of the same arguments.
Yeah, statecraft is really interesting. Just the sort of meta politics, essentially, like how politics works, like how the structure will works. I find it really interesting with all the different possibilities. But yeah, so that's Article 2. That's the last section of Article 2. Um, so yeah, that's the president. I don't really have anything else to say. We can move on to section or Article 3 unless you guys would like to add anything. All right. So, yeah, Article 3. Article 3 is all about the judicial system. So, yeah. So, it outlines, the Supreme Court, the inferior courts. It talks about, juries and everything. So, let's just hop right into it. Okay.
Let's go right into it.
We start with
So,
Section 1.
Section 1. Basically, judicial power is split between the Supreme Courts, which the justices are nominated by the president, and the lower courts, which are created by Congress as need be. And just like many of the other members of government, their pay cannot be altered while they're in office, and they cannot be removed as long as they exhibit good behavior, which is a little vague, but
Yeah.
I imagine it would be similar to the other qualifications to bring impeachment charges.
Yeah. Yeah, I like some of the terminology throughout the Constitution, like from time to time and good behavior. It just like sometimes it just seems so like jarringly out of place. Yeah, and casual. So yeah. But yeah, so that's just a quick article or quick section. You pretty much covered all of it. Yeah, that there's Supreme Court and there's inferior courts, and they get paid. And yeah, so I don't know. I just feel like we should say more. I don't know. Well, yeah. So I guess let's just go to the next section. Yeah, let's see section 2. Okay, section 2. All right. So we got a meme here. So this is you can see that I did the first half and Sebastian did the second half of the pictures because now we get all the memes. Yeah. So yeah. Let's see. So, what are the broad strokes here, Zach?
So this one, as you can see by the lovely Stan, we're on section 2, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So as you can see by the lovely Stanley from The Office, this is pretty much what outlines jury duty.
Mm-hmm.
And again, basically the last section is probably the last clause is what it's called. It's probably the most important, which is the trial of all crimes except in cases of impeachment, which we were just talking about, shall be by jury, and such trial shall be held in the state where the said crimes shall have been committed. So this is reinforcing the idea that states they have their own rights. So if you commit a crime in, let's say, Ohio, you have to be tried in Ohio. And by Ohio law, even if you're a resident in, a decent state. So going further, it needs to be held in the state where the crimes have been committed, but when not committed within any state, the trial shall be at such place or places as the Congress may by law have directed. So if you kill someone in outer space,
no, that's for like DC, U.S. territories.
Yeah.
I think it also talks about maritime law a bit earlier.
Yeah.
So
it actually lists all of the cases in which the judicial branch has jurisdiction, and it is specifically limited to cases regarding the Constitution itself, treaties, the laws, federal laws of the U.S., cases regarding officials, and then disagreements between two states, U.S. As a whole versus a state and citizens of a different state, or citizens of different states, land disputes in different states, or disputes involving a foreign body. So it's pretty much anything that's got like the federal government or states pitted against each other. And the way that the courts are organized under Section 2 of Article 3 makes it so that the SCOTUS has original jurisdiction in the cases that I just mentioned. Otherwise, it has appellate jurisdiction, which means that if a case is appealed upon enough times, it eventually goes to the state court of appeals, the federal court of appeals, and if then they appeal again because they're extra, then it will eventually reach the Supreme Court.
Mm-hmm.
So if you really like appealing, if appealing is appealing to you, then you will reach the Supreme Court eventually.
Yeah, so that's interesting.
Even if it wasn't in the state where the crime was committed.
Yeah. So that's interesting because, like you can imagine like all the different like cases in the country would end up piling up. And so the Supreme Court should only have to deal with what's really important so that the Supreme Court decisions typically, make the news, the important ones. So there's a further level of stratification there, but it starts off saying like, okay, if it can be solved, lower down, then it would be best not to bring it up to the Supreme Court, which is a good idea because it sort of saves them time. But yeah, eventually it'll reach the Supreme Court, which is interesting. But yeah.
As long as there's a legal basis for appealing. You can't just appeal like just because you want to.
Yeah, for the sake of appealing. And I think this might be in a later section of this article, but it also sort of establishes the way that the Supreme Court operates. Like the Supreme Court, if there is a law that the Supreme Court thinks is unconstitutional, but there have been no cases in regards to that law, the Supreme Court can't do anything about it until someone brings up a case. So
yeah, that is actually the concept of judicial review, I'm pretty sure, which isn't present in the Constitution, but has since become a very important part of American government because Chief Justice John Marshall was a huge federalist and basically decided that the Supreme Court should have the power to verify the constitutionality of laws.
Yeah.
And ever since he did that with the case Marbury versus Madison, which is not a very significant case other than the fact that it created judicial review, ever since then it has become the Supreme Court's job to see if laws are constitutional or not.
Yeah. But yeah, it's interesting that like the Supreme Court, they can't they can't make up like hypothetical situations to like use to sort of say a law is unconstitutional. So like if someone were to make a law saying like you can't say the word dog, they could be like, oh, that's violation of the First Amendment. But then if no one gets arrested for it, fined for it, nothing really happens, they can't really do anything about it, which is interesting. So it actually has to be a law, but also an enforced law, because once it's enforced, then you'll end up with problems about it. So yeah.
Oh, and another interesting thing that is not included in the Constitution, but really should be, is that at the beginning of each session, they have to say "oh yes" over and over again.
Oh yay! Oh yay!
Why not?
Yeah, why not?
It comes from like to hear.
Interesting.
Oír.
Yeah.
Which is interesting, but it's really the French verb, not the Spanish.
Weird. Yeah. All right. Let's go to the next one.
Okay. All right, this is one of my favorites.
3.
All right, so Section 3. Literally, it's treason and nothing else. It just outlines why treason's bad, or like what punishment will go to treason. And Section 3, so this is Article 3, Section 3, Clause 2 is like my favorite clause in the entire Constitution, because it sounds like something directly out of like Magic the Gathering or Skyrim.
Okay.
So this is verbatim what it says. The Congress shall have power to declare the punishment of treason, but no attainder of treason shall work corruption of blood or forfeiture except during the life of the person attainted. So it's so insane. It's
Mhm.
such an insane sentence, and all it means is that the Congress can declare what the punishment of treason is, but no one that is related to the person that performed the treasonous act can vote on it or
Can
something.
be forced to give up their property. That's what it is.
Mm.
But it's really the capitalization in this,
Mhm.
the corruption of blood. Both corruption and blood are capitalized.
Yeah.
Forfeiture is capitalized. Life of the person, both life and person are capitalized. So it's
Yeah.
just such a strange clause
Uh-huh.
to say such a simple thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's basically
It's-
like you can't, punish someone for something their brother does, which makes sense, unless they were also involved.
Yeah, this is another thing that originated from the American Revolution,
Mhm.
as did much of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. If people were convicted of treason during the Revolution, their property would basically just get taken.
Mhm.
And if your, for example, husband or wife property was taken, then your property would also get taken. So it's very clearly trying to actually protect against possible civil unrest,
Mm.
because
Yeah.
a lot of the founders thought that the right to revolution was important.
Mhm.
So they didn't want the same things that Britain did to them to happen if there was a future revolution.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, but it also it also outlines what treason is. So, helping the enemy or hurting the nation. It says giving aid or comfort to the enemy. And then it also says that you can't be convicted of treason unless you have the testimony of two witnesses. Um, so it's very high standard to be convicted of treason, I guess is what they're trying to say.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so
yeah,
that's it for
just
section
such
3.
it's such a baller section.
Yeah.
Because it's just all one crime. They're
Yeah.
like, treason's so bad.
We got to talk about it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
So,
but
I will be this Friday. I will be committing treason live on YouTube,
you
just
will.
so that I get the second clause of Article 3 read to me.
Okay. Wow.
I will
Well,
commit treason in 128 seconds. I will speed run.
committing treason. Wow. Well, let's hope that you get fewer than 2 views so that there aren't enough witnesses to convict you of it. But yeah, so that's it for Article 3 about the judicial system, right? There's, yeah, the next one would be Article 4. But yeah, so that's
States relations.
yeah. All right, let's get into it. States relations.
Count by max, and after 3 comes 4. Believe it or not.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so this, Article 4 deals with states relations because, again, at this point, the states were more semi-autonomous. They had more autonomy. I mean, the word state typically means nation, which is interesting. It's just that since we live in the U.S., we think of state as, U.S. state. But
We live in a union.
yeah, so this sort of outlines the states can't go to war with each other because they're in a union, and it's kind of because a lot of the Constitution and a lot of U.S. law is trying to balance federal power versus state power, and I think Article 4 just has to hammer that in a lot, sort of say what is allowed, what isn't allowed, what the states can do, what they can't do. So yeah, let's get right into it. Okay.
Yeah.
Article 4,
So, Section 1.
Section 1. Yeah.
Simply the full faith and credit clause. basically any record or anything that happens in one state has to be recognized by the other states.
Mhm.
So if you've got your Florida driver's license, that license is going to be valid in all of the other states for as
Ooh,
long as
interesting.
Florida remains in the union.
Interesting, because when I was in California, my learner's permit, they said for the first 10 days that I'm visiting California, it's valid, but then after that, it's not. I didn't use it at all, so it didn't matter. But it's weird because Connecticut, like, sort of followed this more strictly. Connecticut said, like, yeah, if you have a learner's permit from any other state, you can use it here. But California was strange. I mean, California tends to be a little strange, but but California was like, yeah, it's only valid for 10 days, and then afterwards it's not. And since I was there for 21 days, that means the latter half of my trip, I could not have used my license. So that's a little peculiar. Because I
Yeah,
guess it's
it's
also
probably because it's a learner's
yeah, it's
permit,
just a
not a
learner's permit.
full-fledged license, so they can do whatever they want. But
Yeah, I guess
Yeah.
that's true. But yeah, so definitely, it's not just like licenses. It's like if you get charged with murder in Connecticut and you just flee to a different state, that doesn't you know you can't
Yeah.
just get off. Essentially, you can't just escape punishment by going to a different state. Uh, even though,
Both,
yeah,
yeah, go.
even though people
Yeah, both
always say,
Article 1 and Section 2 kind of say generally the same thing.
oh, they
Like what
do.
you're saying now is basically Section 2 as well.
Oh, okay.
Because it's like, if you blow up a building in Ohio, I don't know why I keep using Ohio, but if you blow up a building in Ohio, it's just as bad as blowing up a building in like California, even though the costs of the two are vastly different.
Yeah. Should we go to the next one then? Yeah, let's go to.
yeah,
Okay.
I think all we need to do is add Clause 3, Section 2,
Yeah.
which was removed. Basically, avoiding slavery again, saying that fugitive slaves have to be returned. This is ended with either the 13th or 14th Amendments.
Yeah.
I could check.
My source
But
says
basically,
13.
when slavery ended, this part of the Constitution became irrelevant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
It's okay.
It's so vague here, though, that
Mm-hmm.
you could almost interpret it to be meaning that no person held to the service of labor, as in like working in one state, is allowed to escape into another. So, like,
Uh-huh.
if you had a job in your state and then you went into another state, they'd have to return you. But
Yeah,
that's not what
yeah,
they're intending,
yeah.
obviously.
Yeah, it did get repealed with the passage of the 13th Amendment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Ratification.
But yeah, so again, that vagueness, like they're like, we're not gonna say the S word, which is just so it's very strange that like so they must have felt like guilty about what they were doing, but then why did they do it?
Yeah.
The ultimate
Informally,
question.
I
Yeah.
don't know if we said this, but informally, Article 4, Section 2, Clause 3 is known as the Fugitive Slave Clause.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously they didn't call it that because they didn't want to say slave.
Yeah.
But that's how it be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So that's all I have to say about this section. Should I go to the next one?
Absolutely.
Okay. Section 3. So Section 3 is about how a state may join
Ohio
the Union.
again.
Sebastian is obsessed with Ohio just as I am obsessed with time zones.
Well, I'm telling you, man, if we get rid of Ohio, and then
Okay.
we get Puerto Rico in here, and then we got 50 states again, so we can all calm down.
Well, that's interesting because I was about to say, while the Constitution outlines how a state may join the Union, there is no way that a state may leave the Union. There is no like constitutional secession. So all
Well,
secession.
going by the 10th Amendment, though, you could argue that the way for states to secede would be something not enumerated to Congress, so then it would subsequently be a reserved power to the states.
Yeah, I guess, but I don't know. I think wasn't a big like factor in the Civil War was, they said like, oh, you can't secede, you can't leave.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
especially
just
like
because it's dangerous to the stability
yeah,
of the Union as a whole.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
wait, this is a little tidbit about Ohio. Max, you're a big flag guy, right?
yep,
Have
yep,
you ever
absolutely.
seen the Ohio state flag?
Yeah, it's the double.
It is just an abomination. What were they thinking?
It's
What is
it's it's
the
it's the I forgot the term, but it's triangular. It's like two triangles.
It's got like a bullseye on it as
Yep,
well.
yep.
terrible?
It is not a it's like Nepal. Nepal and Ohio for some reason share weird spiky flags. But yeah, so for
It's
a
a
new state,
swallowtail flag. That's
yeah,
what it's called.
swallowtail. So for new states to join, they have to be admitted by Congress. But there are also specifics like they can't make a state within another state. Um, so you can't just say, all right, we're going to take White Plains, New York, random town, state now. You can't do that, illegal. Um, and also, you can't make a state that's made up of two other states or a piece of two other states or more without the permission of those states. So you can do it, just you need their permission. But what you like can't do at all is just make a new state entirely from one state. But if you're synthesizing the states together, uh, if the states agree and Congress agrees, you're allowed to do that. But why would the state agree though? That's the thing. It hasn't happened because like there have been some like new state movements. I think one was they wanted to make a state called like Jefferson or something, and it would be Northern California plus like Southern Oregon. But obviously California and Oregon were like, no, you're not doing that. Uh,
Yeah. Well,
so
Virginia originally claimed pretty much all Western land
mhm,
because they had sea-to-sea charters.
mhm.
And if they go off the colonial charter, that means like technically all Western land could be Virginia.
But
But
not when it was made a
uh,
state though, right? Like that
well,
was when it
yeah,
was a
once it was
colony and a
made a state,
territory.
and once other states were made states,
Hmm.
they had to relinquish their Western territories up to a certain border.
Yeah, I think that was like the Appalachians, right? Like the mountains.
Yeah, it was whatever was established in the Northwest Ordinance
Hmm.
and the Land Ordinance of 1784, which is like the only significant thing the Articles of Confederation did
Yeah,
at all.
yeah. So yeah, then the second clause of this section. So was what I was talking about. Admitting new states was the first clause. The second clause says this is like one of the important sort of principles in the Constitution is nothing in this Constitution shall be so construed as to prejudice any claims of the United States or of any particular state. Um, so it's always sort of whereas some documents, it's like, okay, if I don't specifically say it, like you could include it, but here they're saying no. If I don't specifically say it, I didn't say it for a reason, you know?
Mhm.
Tactical
It's
silence. Like
Yep, it's strict
yeah.
constructionist viewpoint
Hmm.
opposed to
Yeah.
loose constructionist.
Yeah. And I think that's good. Like if you want to add something, add an amendment. I think it works well to have this as opposed to like oh, it doesn't say whether or not, like whether to or not to. Because otherwise, the Constitution, if it didn't have that, it would basically have to have like an eighth article. It would have to have another article that's just things we cannot do, and then just list like a crazy amount of things they can't do. So I feel like it's just out of convenience that they don't, they just don't say it, and they can't do it. So I think that's good. But yeah, so that's it for this section. Let's go to the next section. Section 4. We live in a republic.
We live in a republic.
Yeah. So I believe this is the section that says each state will be guaranteed a Republican form of government. Yeah, that's what it says.
United States shall guarantee to every state in this union, so the United States shall guarantee to the United States a Republican form of government and shall protect each of them against invasion and on application of the legislature or of the executive when the legislature cannot be convened against domestic violence. So when the legislature couldn't be
They couldn't be bothered.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think by domestic violence, I don't think they mean like domestic violence. I think they mean sort of civil unrest.
Yeah. I mean, violence
This is
originating
old
within
speech.
the United States
Yeah.
against the United States.
What we
this
would
is
now
an
call
example-
civil unrest. Yeah.
This is a part of the Constitution that you could construe to, like, prevent secession because secession is usually domestically violent,
That's true.
especially when they don't give back their federal land inside of the state,
yeah.
which they almost never do.
Yeah. Almost never. I mean, there was only one time it happened, and they didn't. So.
Well, there have been other attempts.
Yeah. But they never
I
actually
guess
went through.
There was only one, like, real attempt.
Yeah, there was only one, ratified by the governments of the state, of the states involved. But yeah, so the Republican form of government, does that sort of outline the state legislatures? Say like, oh, the states need to have legislatures? Because it's interesting because a lot of states some have unicameral legislatures, but many have bicameral legislature, and the state governments often look like miniature versions of the U.S., the federal government, because you have a state senator, a state rep, and a governor. So I think, is that sort of what says it? Like that part, the Republican form?
Yeah, that's what is generally interpreted as Republican.
Mhm.
They basically didn't want, like, Rhode Island to be like Rhode Island and make it some religious, like, aristocratic government or something.
Yeah. Yeah, just make it a monarchy, just like...
Or a theocracy or whatever.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
what Rhode Island
Yeah,
would have
theocracy. Interesting. Yeah, let's have the King of New York. I feel like that's a movie. Like, that's a movie title. Even if it doesn't
done. The
exist
King
yet.
of New York is the mobster from Spider-Man. I don't know why I thought of him.
Yeah. Yeah,
The big
Kingpin.
dude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyways, yeah, so that's Article 4. So just stuff about the states.
Love that article.
Yep.
Because just in parentheses, if the legislature couldn't care less.
No, I think it's if they're not, like, convened, right?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, not
But the way
convened.
it's
Yeah.
so funny.
When the legislature cannot be convened. Yeah, but that means when they're not in session, because they only need to meet once a year. So if they're not meeting, then, yeah. But yeah, so that's Article 4. Let's go to Article 5. So the last 3 articles each only have one section. They just are. So let's jump
Wait,
right into it.
no, Article 6 has 3.
Oh, it does?
Well, it has one section, but it has 3 clauses.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah. So F needs work. Nice job here. Yeah, so Article 5 outlines how amendments can occur. So I think there are 2 routes for an amendment to occur, right? It's 2/3 of Congress can propose it, and then it needs to be ratified by 3/4 of the state, or 2/3 of the states can propose it, and then needs to be ratified by 3/4 of the state. States, right? Yeah, so it's interesting because people always think, like, when they think of amendments, they always think like, oh, 2/3 of Congress, but it's really the states that have to ratify it. So that's just an interesting thing. It's really 3/4 of the states, so it's a lot of emphasis on the states. Is that, like, if 2/3 of Congress, if 2/3 of Congress, like, proposed an amendment, and just all the states didn't like it, they could just shoot it down, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the states proposing an amendment rarely has happened.
It's
I think it
happened
happened with
once.
prohibition. I don't think it's
It happened
yeah
once. It was for the most recent,
prohibition, right?
the most recent amendment, which is senators cannot give them and congressmen cannot give themselves a raise until the next term because they wouldn't put that on themselves, you know.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, so that's the 27th Amendment. But yeah, we'll do a whole episode on amendments at some point in the future. Patch notes. So, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's pretty much just how it also talks about which amendments can't be made. And there are three amendments that can't be made. And one of them is, the year 1808, like they can't stop the slave trade essentially. Um, and that's still there, unfortunately. You know, that's like a stain forever, just written there. Uh, and
Yeah.
let's see. Then, they can't make an amendment that affects the first and fourth clauses of the ninth section of the first article, what was that? That was something.
That's basically
Yeah.
the listing of the powers of Congress.
Okay. So,
right? So
yeah.
they can't. Is that it?
Yes, they can't. Yeah.
They can't basically change Congress's powers.
Okay, and then the last one is that they can't deprive a state of equal suffrage in the Senate. So that means they can't say, okay, screw you, Connecticut, you only get one senator now. Could you imagine that? Like, just,
Yeah.
it would be funny if just a state just did something like that all the other states got mad at, and so then they just revoked a senator. It would be like a vibe check. So, yeah. But yeah, so they can't do any of those three things. But other than that, anything goes, I guess, for amendments because
Too bad, because 3/4 of the states would definitely vote to deprive Ohio of its senators.
Yeah, no senators for Ohio. Ohio gets -1 senators. They get a senator, and whatever decision they make is countered. It is negative. It's opposite. Yeah. Anyways, yeah. So they say the Constitution is a living document. Like that's the cliche that they like to call it. Um, but yeah, there was intentionally founding fathers intentionally. They wanted this document to sort of last forever. Not well, maybe not forever, but they didn't want it to be like the Articles of Confederation, which were likely too rigid and ended up collapsing. So they wanted to make sure that their constitution would be able to continue because I think France, in the same time span, has gone through like 6 constitutions. They just can't keep it. It's just too messy. But if you think of all the amendments to our Constitution, it's sort of like we've gone through 6 different constitutions, except without actually having to deal with the chaoticness of changing the document all the time. So it's actually very useful that they programmed in this sort of system to update the document. So,
Yeah, in my opinion, it's been far too long since an amendment, because it's been 28 years since the most recent amendment.
Yeah.
And I'm actually predicting that there's going to be an amendment soon.
What amendment do you think it's going to be?
I'm thinking if the election pans out and either party gains 2/3 majority in both houses, I think they're going to amend something.
I don't think either party can get
healthcare related, not necessarily universal healthcare.
Yeah.
But I think people, especially politicians, are kind of fed up with the federal government's inability to like manage a virus and provide
I can see that.
for states. So I'm calling it. There's going to be. Would it be the 28th Amendment?
It would be the 28th.
Yeah, in the next 4 years. 28th Amendment's going to get passed.
Yeah, I don't think either party. Yeah, I don't think either party can get 2/3 though. Is there polling data for that?
I don't know. It's unlikely.
Yeah.
But
well, because
it could go the other way. because if enough states are fed up about how
Yeah.
this went down, and like they think that they got treated poorly by the federal government, because honestly they kind of did. If 3/4 of the states wanted to propose something like that, that would undermine the federal government.
Yeah.
Uh,
There's been a
that
lot
could
of
happen too.
conflict. There's been a lot of conflict between the governors and the president uh, in regards to the virus. Um, yeah, what else was I going to say? I was going to say something else. Oh yeah, but it's very, I would say it's very good that they sort of like outlined that, 2/3 of Congress and, 3/4 of the states are needed to ratify this, because that sort of presents like partisan amendments from occurring, because it has to be something that everyone generally agrees on, which is good because it means that basically if something is outdated, people will tend to agree like it needs to be gone. Like if part of the Constitution was like everything must be conducted in handwritten on like parchment, everyone would agree for the sake of convenience, like, yeah, we can move stuff to digital now. Like that wouldn't be a partisan thing. Um, so I think it's like pretty nice that there's like a high bar. There's a high bar, but not an impossibly high bar to pass an amendment. Like I think it's appropriately scaled, um, because I don't think like any partisan amendments would be a very good thing. Like an amendment where it was just, even if they got 2/3 of the vote, where it was just like all one party said yes and all one party said no. Um, I think it's good that this sort of prevents that, because partisanship like shouldn't be able to just change like the founding document.
Yeah.
So yeah.
In order to get a 2/3 majority now, pretty sure there would need to be like 290 something.
Yeah,
Congress people
290 House of Representatives and 67 senators. So
there would need it would need to be bipartisan enough.
yeah,
So it still is going to be a little bit of a stretch, but
yeah,
depends how the next election turns out.
yeah, and then 38 states. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, we'll see. So yeah, let's go to Article 6. Unlimited power.
Unlimited power.
Yeah. So if I remember correctly, what is this about? So it's talking about debts.
Yeah, it's Zach. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like the debts that were like before the Constitution was um, created, are still valid and are still up under the current Constitution.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's the first clause.
Yeah, and then the second clause, which is what the picture is in relation to, is the Constitution, the laws of the United States, which whatever, and all treaties made which shall be made under the authority of the United States shall be the supreme law of the land. And the judges.
So the supremacy clause right there.
Yeah.
And the unlimited power.
Yeah, so that's prioritizing, federal law over state law. We talked about that a little earlier. But yeah, so then, the senators and representatives before mentioned, and the members of the several state legislators, and all executive and judicial officers, both of the United States and of the several states, shall be bound by oath or affirmation. So that's basically saying, to support the Constitution, that anyone in government has to take oath to support the Constitution. Like even I think police, right? Aren't they like police officers have to like they are supposed to like do an oath to the Constitution, like to uphold the Constitution.
Maybe.
Like
They definitely have some sort of oath.
like law enforcement is supposed to uphold the Constitution before even law. So like I don't know if it's said in here, but it's basically that if the like law enforcement themselves actually think that a law is unconstitutional, they're supposed to not enforce it. And that actually happened, I think, like a few months ago in like Seattle. Um, there was like, like a, coronavirus order. There was a like officer that actually got fired because they thought that the order was unconstitutional, like, and that's whatever debate. But he, based on the oath, said like, "Oh, this is unconstitutional, so I'm not going to uphold it." But then he got fired, so maybe it was constitutional. Who knows? Um, yeah. So
Yeah. So
yeah.
the Pledge of Allegiance,
Mhm.
definitely what they
Yeah.
have to say every day in, day out.
Mhm.
And the other interesting thing about it is no religious
Yeah.
tests, even though it's pretty much become like de facto for only Christian presidents to
Mhm.
have a chance of winning, which is kind of unfortunate.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say that's unfortunate. Um, as a non-Christian.
Yeah,
um, yeah. So yeah, all the presidents have been Christian. Uh, so there are some like other like atheists and Jewish, Muslim in the Congress. So that at
yeah.
least, yeah. But yeah, there's just this like image of the president. It's strange. There's like it's weird how like the presidency is. But yeah, anyways, that's all of Article 6. So yeah, let's go to the next slide. All right, Article 7. So this is the last article, and it's basically like just saying, how will this be? Oh, and it's one sentence, so I'll just read it. The ratification of the Convention of 9 states shall be sufficient for the establishment of this Constitution between the states so ratifying the same. So, as I said at the beginning, the Articles of Confederation required 9 states out of 13, like, to say yes to do anything, which was limiting. But all of the states at this point sort of agreed, like, yeah, this isn't working out. So the Constitution was passed just like anything else would have been during the Articles of Convention, which is interesting. Like, it had the same requisite that the Articles of Convention had. Um, so, so yeah, that's interesting. So like, it required the last system to incorporate the new system, which is interesting. So yeah, that's that's pretty much it. The states, they ratified the Constitution, starting with Delaware, and eventually they all did. And that is the system we currently have today. That's the whole Constitution. Um,
Yeah.
so, yeah, let's go to final thoughts. So, final thoughts. We will do a sequel video about the amendments because they have caused quite a lot of change to this original document, and we've alluded to them. But we'll do a whole episode focused on them because there's 27 of them, and we are already, 2 hours and 12 minutes in. So if we were to make this episode the Constitution and the amendments, it would have gotten a lot longer. So, yeah. So, this is a fun episode.
Yeah.
The Constitution,
Yeah.
baller document. You gotta say, pretty baller document.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people think that maybe it's not the best. I think that I think the most important thing that they did out of any other thing is that they made it a document
Mm-hmm.
that they were like, this can be changed. So the Article 5 of the Constitution, I would argue, is one of the most important parts of the Constitution. Because that's what allowed slavery to be changed. That's what allowed, women to get the right to vote. That's what allowed things to change and be up to code to today.
Yeah.
And I think Article 5 is like the staple of the United States, is that we can change our Constitution. Not at a moment's notice, but when we need to.
Yeah. There's so much possibility thanks
Yeah.
to
Exactly.
Article 5. Because, like, if you think about it, they can change any part of the Constitution. They can create term limits for senators. They could, abolish the president if that's what America wants to do one day. I mean, that might be what happens.
They could
Another baller
make it
thing.
they could make it an executive council, make it three presidents, and to do anything they need
Yeah,
two out of three. Like they could do anything. It's
yeah.
yeah.
Another baller thing is the signatures at the bottom. Actually,
Hmm.
like George Washington, the man himself, signed his name G. Washington. It
Nice.
actually looks like G degree, like
G degree.
G degrees Washington.
G degrees. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
G degrees Washington outside.
Well, I'm looking at all these signatures.
Yeah.
Let me throw them in.
All right. All right. Yeah. Let's get that. Okay.
I think this is it.
Yeah.
This might not be all of them,
Okay.
but here I'm putting it on final thoughts.
All right. Yeah.
I believe that's all of them. I'm trying to look.
Yeah. So yeah. Let's see. We got all the signatures. There we go. Yeah. So the each state's Articles of Confederation people. I don't know what were they called for the Articles of Confederation, like the state people.
I think they were still called representatives.
Okay,
Not sure.
representative. Yeah, nice. You see the little brackets for like Pennsylvania, South Carolina, Georgia. So yeah, that's interesting. All these people signing off, um, ratifying the Constitution. But yeah, so
This is George Washington's signature
all
zoomed
right,
in, and
all
it's
right.
literally G degree Washington.
G degree Washington. Nice. Yeah, but definitely, I'd have to agree with Sebastian that uh, the most important part of the Constitution is Article 5, that it's able to be changed. Um, yeah. And I can think of like, there are probably like half a dozen amendments that I would want to see passed. Um, but I'm not like there are some interesting amendment proposals I've seen. Like there's the I think there's like equal rights amendment that was proposed, but it sort of died because it was too long. Like it hadn't been ratified for too long, which would basically reinforce the Equal Rights Act, but instead of just being an act, it would be an amendment. Then there's also a like balanced budget amendment, which basically says um, that like the U.S. can't spend more than it gains in taxes, um, that
because
which would
because
like
I searched up what George Washington's signature was, it
mhm.
gave me the option of shopping. So I clicked on that, and I found this thing on eBay, which is George Washington letter signed on the September 25th, 1777, for $22,500.
Wow,
You. It
used
says used.
used the letter from George Washington. I yeah, I think it's a little used. Um, yeah, interesting. Uh, but yeah, so definitely. There are a ton of amendments that I would think would be interesting. But, we'll have to wait and see if they get proposed and whatnot. But yeah, that's the democratic process. That's our Constitution. And that is this week's episode of the Gravity Max live stream. So I would like to thank Zach for being our guest this week. Thanks for coming on. You've been
Yeah.
very knowledgeable. You're like our expert here. Um, yeah, the expert. Thank you. Like lots of insight. Thanks for being here. And thank you all for watching. And thank you, Sebastian, for being my co-host as always. So yeah, make sure. Oh, we've got some more Jan McCarthy. I'm tired. I'm on break. Oh, he was on break, so he wasn't slacking off. Um, but yeah, thank you all for watching. And thank you to everyone that's rewatching in the future. Uh, Maybe some amendments have been passed. Comment in the comments below. But yeah, so that's pretty much it. Unless you guys have anything else to say, I'm just going to end the stream. All
One
right.
day, there'll be an amendment passed outlawing veganism. There will be a mandated amount of eggs that must be consumed every morning. at the hours between 9 a.m. and 9:01 a.m.
I would actually see the opposite as more likely,
I'll kill you.
legally requiring veganism. But anyways, I'm not saying I endorse it.